The federal government issued a clarification today on entry requirements for truckers. Truckers will have to be fully vaccinated to enter Canada.
On this Saturday night, tighter rules for truckers. COVID restrictions for unvaccinated truckers kick into gear today.
I have no plan on quarantining unless I'm forced to.
How it could affect our already impaired supply chain. Pandemic politics.
Vaccine mandates work.
But will Ottawa support Quebec's controversial tax on the unvaccinated?
Turning now to news in Canada, people in cities across the country and around the world have taken part in so-called freedom rallies. The rallies oppose COVID-19 measures, and thousands turned out in Toronto despite the cold. Lorenda Redekop reports.
In Toronto, thousands gathered outside the Ontario legislature. Speakers included politicians who've become known for opposing vaccine mandates, lockdowns, and mask requirements.
Hundreds of truckers continue to roll east, and with more joining the movement with each passing city, feelings towards vaccine mandates have heightened.
Thunder Bay became the latest stop of the Freedom Convoy today as it continued its cross-Canada journey to Ottawa, before stopping for the night at a Dairy Queen International Speedway. Kurt Black has the details.
The cross-Canadian convoy in opposition to federal vaccine mandates made the nearly 500-kilometer journey Wednesday from Kenora to Thunder Bay, first making their way through Quebec Falls, where crowds cheered them on as they continued east on Highway 1117.
Police in and around Toronto are warning of traffic disruptions today. A convoy of trucks set to pass through on those major 400 series highways around 12 noon. The truckers are driving from Windsor to Ottawa to meet up with a main convoy of anti-vaccine mandate protesters who are traveling all the way from British Columbia and picking up participants along the way.
On this Thursday night, anger builds as a protest rolls its way to Ottawa. From opposing vaccine mandates,
I think they pushed it a little too far,
to wanting to overthrow the government and intimidate the media.
You guys!
On this Friday night, preparing for protest. A truckers' convoy rolls into the nation's capital.
The demonstrations this weekend will be unique, fluid, risky, and significant.
The warning from police and the demands from protesters.
Every single person that Parliament resign.
On this Saturday night, truckers roll into Ottawa, hauling their anti-vaccine mandate message.
Let us free! Let us free! End these mandates!
Fringe groups catch a ride on the convoy. Concerns about safety put the Prime Minister on the move.
The crowd there, you can see the foot traffic going towards the left side of your screen to the Parliament buildings. The crowd there is growing larger. They are protesting not just vaccine mandates, but to demand an end to pandemic-related restrictions, calling for government officials like the Prime Minister to resign, a whole slate of grievances that are being protested in Ottawa this morning.
Let's go! Let's go! Woo! Let's go!
Good evening. For 2 days now, the truckers' protest has taken over the capital. Thousands have converged on the downtown core, protesting against all COVID-19 measures.
But there are growing calls tonight to contain the demonstration that has brought tense moments for businesses and services. This is a live look at Parliament Hill this hour. A smaller crowd out than yesterday, but there was a shift in tone, with anger directed at police, security, those trying to enforce indoor mask policies, and journalists looking to report on the developing situation.
Ottawa police confirmed several criminal investigations underway tonight. The disturbing scenes sparking outrage and widespread condemnation include people dancing on the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at the National War Memorial and the statue of Terry Fox riddled with upside-down Canadian flags and protest signs. Police also investigating threatening behavior to officers, city workers, and others, along with damage to a city vehicle.
On this Sunday night, parked on Parliament Hill. Gridlock in the nation's capital. Bad behavior from Convoy protesters.
They were demanding meals, harassing staff.
In Canada, another campaign is gaining strength, a campaign to remove Justin Trudeau from office. It started off as a protest against vaccine mandates, but thanks to the Canadian Prime Minister's scornful dismissal of the demands, it has snowballed into a resistance against his leadership and his politics. Truckers and farmers, interestingly, have gridlocked Canada's capital, Ottawa. Most of them say they will not leave until Prime Minister Trudeau steps down. Trudeau says he will not be intimidated, come what may.
What started as a group of truckers protesting COVID-19 vaccine mandates called the Freedom Convoy. That's what they call themselves. It's snowballed now into sort of blockade in Canada. For days, we've seen chaos in Ottawa. That's Canada's capital city, of course, as truckers protest the new vaccine order, which requires truckers entering Canada to be fully vaccinated or face testing and quarantine requirements.
Street hockey in front of the Supreme Court of Canada. Dancing Santa, a couple of anti-Semitic signs, and horn blasts all day long. Many who call Ottawa home and don't live in the middle of the road have had enough.
These people are taking our freedom away to promote their own brand of freedom, and I don't think that's fair.
Get rid of them. You hear it down there? That's where I live.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau slammed protesters who have been holding rallies since January 29th. Prime Minister Trudeau, while speaking from an undisclosed location, blasted truckers for demanding an end to all COVID restrictions and disrupting normalcy. Listen in.
Freedom of expression, assembly, and association are cornerstones of democracy, but Nazi symbolism, racist imagery, and desecration of war memorials are not. It is an insult to memory and truth. Hate can never be the answer. Over the past few days, Canadians were shocked and frankly disgusted by the behavior displayed by some people protesting in our nation's capital.
We are therefore calling on all levels of government in Canada to end all COVID mandates and restrictions. We will continue our protest until we see a clear plan for their elimination. Premier Scott Moe of Saskatchewan has taken leadership in Canada in ending restrictions and mandates in that province. Hopefully, these words will turn into long-lasting action. So far, no one from the federal, provincial, or municipal government has spoken directly with us. Instead, they are using you, the media, to portray us as racists, misogynists, and even terrorists. As a woman with Métis heritage, a mother and a grandmother, I am offended. The reality is that members of this freedom movement are average, peace-loving, and law-abiding citizens from all walks of life who are fed up with being disrespected and bullied by our government.
Next to Canada, and a truckers' protest over the COVID-19 vaccine mandate has brought the country's capital to a virtual standstill. Some of the crowd has died down for now, but police expect massive protests this weekend. The military remains on standby if it's needed. A solidarity blockade is growing on an arterial highway at the US-Canada border in the province of Alberta. Police have moved to clear protesters from the major highway, but more demonstrators have arrived there.
The public should expect a large police presence in and around the downtown core and other areas around the city at different times over the weekend. The service will manage these protests as best we can with the intention to limit disruption, but our number one priority will be the safety of the public. These events are always fluid and dynamic, and we will be doing our best to respond quickly and to communicate any important information to the public on a timely basis.
On this Saturday night, rising tensions across the country as the so-called Freedom Rally parties near Parliament Hill. Protests and counter-protests spread to other Canadian cities. Go home!
We are on day 8 of this occupation. Our city is under siege. This group is emboldened by the lack of enforcement by every level of government. They are terrorizing our residents, torturing them with incessant honking, threatening them and preventing them from leading their lives. People cannot go to work or open their businesses. They cannot sleep, walk, shop, go to medical appointments, or enjoy their neighborhood. This group is a threat to our democracy. What we're seeing is bigger than just a City of Ottawa problem. This is a nationwide insurrection. This is madness. We need a concrete plan to put an end to this now.
This isn't right. It can't be mandated. This is freedom of choice, freedom of information. We're a free country here. We don't need somebody like Trudeau out there telling you you have to take it or else. And calling us names, putting us down, calling us racist. I am by no means a racist. I am not a misogynist. I am none of the above. Okay? I'm a hard worker. I have a house and a mortgage to pay. We're in this for, we're a free country here.
What do you want to accomplish by being here today?
I would like to end the mandates. I would like to end the mandates.
You've been polling Canadians' attitudes towards not only their governments, but also this restriction. Everyone's trying to figure out, are the truckers tapping into a real issue, or is they, as Justin Trudeau calls them, a fringe group?
I would not call it a fringe group. I would say that based on the polling that we're seeing, most recently 54% of Canadians, and so that includes a lot of those people who rolled up their sleeves to get vaccinated not once, not twice, but 3 times in some cases, are ready for a conversation about whether it's time to start lifting and ending restrictions. And the same thing on federal mandates, particularly for truckers. So those two things combined to me say that, Evan, you know, you've got the people who are really impassioned, really all in, very angry. And then you've got a much larger group representing millions of Canadians. And as I say, across the political divide, who are now saying, you know what, I could be ready to see restrictions lifting. There is a sense of inevitability and fatigue around the pandemic.
On this Sunday night, state of emergency. Ottawa's plea for help to deal with the ongoing protest.
This is a siege.
And what U.S. support
The Canadian truckers are heroes.
could mean for the demonstration. Rolling back restrictions, the prairie provinces promising to lift pandemic measures.
This is a huge mess. I'm going to step out of the way so you can see truckers right now just backed up for miles all along Detroit. We're on Fort Street right now. My photographer, Aaron Bryant, showing you right now. You can see the hazard lights on. These trucks have not moved since we got here, probably about an hour ago. So we're going to kind of look around and he's going to pan over and show you. Parked all the way down. A lot of very frustrated people. We're hearing a lot of horns honking. We're at some times seeing trucks just turn around and going the opposite way. As you're saying that, of course, this happened around 5 o'clock. Take a look at some video right now that we did get earlier in the day. Around 5 o'clock today, 4 o'clock, this is when things started to really go haywire. So as you said at the top of the show, what happens? All the protesters on the Canadian side upset about COVID mandates. Basically, they shut down the entrance into Canada. So great, the truckers get over, but then they can't get in. So of course, you just close down the bridge entirely, but then everyone is stuck out here for hours, and you can't take the tunnel because the trucks can't go through the tunnel because they're too big. So then if you reroute all the way to the Blue Water Bridge in Port Huron, that's a very long way from here.
It's Monday night, Canada's capital under a state of emergency. After 11 days, police are finally taking action, attempting to clear protesters.
We are turning up the heat in every way we possibly can.
His appeal for help to cut off funding and fuel, and the injunction to stop the horns. Plus, we look at foreign influence on the protest.
We need to be very vigilant about external forces, that funds which are being collected are not used for inappropriate purposes.
On this Tuesday night, gridlock at a busy border crossing.
We're putting the pressure because we want the attention.
The latest protest, this time at a crucial route between the U.S. and Canada. Saskatchewan's premier plans to drop all public health restrictions, plus the pressure on other provinces to do the same.
A decision was made to wedge, to divide, and to stigmatize.
The Liberal MP criticizing his own government's handling of the pandemic.
I'm an Uber driver. I live on day-to-day basis. I had enough of COVID already 2 years. And now these people came and invited the city. I have to refuse 5 out of 10 trips just because they want to come to downtown or go from downtown.
People living down here at Sal, I run a shirt shop here and we can't open because of them. We've had staff assaulted by them. I've been assaulted by them. Bumped into, tried to take my sign. The verbal abuse is just not. My wife and I spent 6 hours on Saturday in the red zone, constant harassment.
I'm very sorry if your life is being disrupted, but then at the same time, I would encourage you to come out here and help this end quicker so that we can all get back to life as it should be, quiet and peaceful and not told what to do.
There's breaking news tonight that the so-called Freedom Convoy in Canada protesting vaccine mandates could be expanding to the United States, starting in Los Angeles on the Super Bowl and gathering steam across the country, ending in Washington for the State of the Union address.
Well, while you are gearing up for Super Bowl Sunday, putting in your pizza orders, stocking your bar, get ready for a distraction of sorts that doesn't include the halftime show or those creative ads. The Department of Homeland Security is actually concerned about a convoy, an extension of those trucker protests that we've seen at the Canadian border over vaccine mandates. So in an effort to keep everyone safe, the NFL is tightening security.
From Michigan to New York, gridlock at the U.S.'s northern border.
We ain't moving from here.
Day and night, truckers and their supporters protesting COVID vaccine mandates by clogging international bridges.
I just kind of want everybody out there to just hear what we're saying.
It's the latest choke point in the nation's supply chain crisis.
American officials are urging Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to use federal powers to end the blockade at key border crossings. That includes, of course, the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor. Protests there are wreaking havoc on the auto industry. On top of that, there are concerns about copycat convoys in the U.S. this weekend.
This morning, the border backup is starting to ripple across the U.S. as Canadian truckers protesting COVID vaccine mandates are adding to the U.S. supply chain crisis.
The economic harm that this occupation is having on international trade is not sustainable, and it must come to an end.
The auto industry hit hard. A parts shortage is already forcing GM to cancel shifts at a Michigan assembly plant.
There are hardworking men and women in an industry that's just getting back to full strength who are now going to be out of a job. It's going to have massive impacts on all of us in Michigan.
But I'm asking about the bigger issue here. Is why did this, and why truckers? And I thought, during the pandemic, I've talked about this many times. We would see these ads, we're all in it together, and I think, no, we're not. No, we're not. There are some people who stay home and some people who bring them the food. If you're just ordering Amazon and you don't ever have to go out and your job you can do remotely, but who's bringing the Amazon things? The trucker. It looked, you did not use that word elitist in your whole speech, but that's the word that I think is on people's tongues and minds. And that certainly is what populists, including bad ones like Trump, play on. But there is this idea, and it's not wrong, that some people are staying home in their Lululemons and other people can afford to wait out and get a free vacation and money from the government, and other people can't, and they're pissed off, the people who can't. Justin Trudeau, what? You're laughing, but Justin Trudeau, I thought he was kind of a cool guy, and I started to read what he said. This is a couple of weeks ago, or maybe this is September, but he was talking about people who are not vaccinated. He said they don't believe in science. They're often misogynistic, often racist. No, they're not.
That was not smart of him at all.
Right. He said, but they take up space. And with that, we have to make a choice in terms of a leader as a country. Do we tolerate these people? It's tolerate them. Now you do sound like him.
That was...
and recently he talked about them holding unacceptable views.
Wow. I'm surprised to hear that Trudeau said those things.
You didn't see the blackface? No, I'm kidding about that. I'm not. That was not a good look for him. But come on. That's, I think, what gets under people's skin.
We're free. We're free. We're free.
A group of protesters, many appear to be veterans wearing military attire, dismantle fencing surrounding the war memorial. Fencing put up after this scene during the first weekend of the protest. Police are still investigating. As the crowd around the memorial swelled on Saturday, at first only a couple of police officers were visible. Outnumbered, they talked to the dismantlers about their cause.
A statement saying to the politicians that the soldiers, you don't see in them our representatives because they're betraying our country at this point in time.
Protesters cleared the steps of snow and yelled to watch out for the flowers placed there.
Now, good point.
We're going to be back at the same point where people are now going to cause damage, because unless you guys are here 24/7, I actually don't think it's going to be the people that cause damage. It's going to be Justin Trudeau and his gang of thieves.
Yes.
And if we got to put a man on this, because you guys have what, like 1,000 cops in the city right now?
So that's what I'm saying.
So we'll put a man on it then.
Excellent. This is on you guys.
After days of protests by truckers against COVID rules at the Ambassador Bridge in Ontario, a standoff between the Canadian police and protesters continued on Saturday. The demonstrators who are opposing the government's strict pandemic restrictions occupied the Ambassador Bridge for 5th straight day, snarling international trade. In a bid to break the ongoing bridge blockade, police pushed back protesters from the foot of the Ambassador Bridge, but flouting police orders, more and more people started streaming into the area, while there were a few who drove away from the Ambassador Bridge, spanning the river between Detroit, Windsor and Ontario. There were hundreds of protesters arrived to reinforce the crowd and settled into a face-off with police.
If they want to grab us and hook us up and take us away, so be it. There will be no violence, there will be no resistance. I might sit my butt on the ground, they might have to drag me to the paddy wagon, but so be it. But I will not resist, I will not fight.
The scuffle between the police and the protesters took place after a judge on Friday granted injunction against Ambassador Bridge blockade, making it clear that blocking the border crossing will be deemed as a criminal offense, which could further lead to seizure of vehicles and the inability to enter United States. However, in defiance of new warnings to end the blockade, scores of protesters spent the night at the bridge, chanting slogans of freedom and holding placards which read, and I quote, "We have a constitutional right to protest. It is our human right."
After days of protests that brought this crucial trade route between the U.S. and Canada to a standstill, police today putting an end to the week-long blockade.
You have a vehicle that's parked in here. We're asking you to move it.
Towing cars and pickup trucks and arresting a handful of protesters. Roshan Singh on the border as authorities moved in.
Law enforcement has made its last push to clear protesters out of the way. They're about a mile from the bridge entrance, and there's no protesters left.
Beginning in Fort Erie, Ontario, a number of trucks slow-rolled their way to the Niagara region Sunday morning.
This is not just for the truckers. This is the backbone. They are the backbone of Canada and the Canadian and American good.
Freedom! Freedom!
Protests like these come as convoys across the country are heading to Ottawa to oppose a vaccine mandate, which requires truckers traveling back and forth across the U.S. border to be immunized against COVID-19.
Well, it is over. The blockade by protesters that had prevented the Ambassador Bridge from being open for the last 7 days. Police broke it up today, early Sunday morning. They started that effort Saturday, but it stalled. Protesters had come out last night. Vehicles were still in the area. They had a problem. They decided this morning to take a different tactic, a different tone. Yesterday's tactic on Saturday was very much asking protesters to leave, pleading with them that was the best course of action. Today, it was very different. The RCMP were in full force today. The RCMP tactical assault vehicle was brought up to the front of the line. They told people that they had to leave, and then police officers converged from the front and from the rear and pushed the protesters together. They also knocked on the windows of the pickup trucks that were parked in that area. They told the drivers to get out, and then each of the two drivers who had refused to leave was arrested. After 7 days trying to resolve this situation has been resolved by way of some arrests, by way of police action, and Now we wait for the bridge to reopen.
Tonight, Canada taking drastic new action to put an end to the so-called Freedom Convoy trucker protests, paralyzing the country's capital city. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoking the Emergencies Act, a never-before-used law granting the Canadian government broad powers, including the ability to remove vehicles and freeze bank accounts.
Occupying streets, harassing people, breaking the law. This is not a peaceful protest.
Tonight, officials blocking people from crossing the border into Canada.
The Canadian Border Services Agency is already turning back non-Canadians trying to enter Canada to participate in blockades.
In the day's other news, the government of Canada declared an emergency today, targeting demonstrators who have tied up the capital city of Ottawa and critical border crossings. John Yang reports.
After weeks of disruption across Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoked emergency powers for the first time in peacetime today in a bid to halt anti-vaccine protests, including giving the government the authority to prohibit public assembly and some travel.
A look at Ottawa this morning, where for the first time ever, the Prime Minister has invoked the Emergencies Act. It is Tuesday, February 15th. We are Canada's Morning Show, and with that shot there, you can still see protesters on Parliament Hill.
You bet. Good morning, everybody. And Ottawa is where we begin this morning with this unprecedented move by the federal government in response to those ongoing protests.
Since the Freedom Convoy protests began, the Canadian Forces has launched investigations into 7 active members who have publicly taken an anti-vaccine stance. Some allegedly participated in the Ottawa occupation, including 2 members of JTF2, an elite counterterrorism unit.
To the Emergencies Act, there are lots of questions about what evidence the government has to invoke it. Section 3 defines a national emergency as an urgent and critical situation of a temporary nature that seriously threatens the ability of the government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada, and that cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law of Canada.
So what are your thoughts on Trudeau invoking the Emergencies Act?
Absolutely ridiculous to put something like that on a peaceful protest is just insane.